Belén Celaya, and I am one of the education and outreach coordinators at the Women's Fund. Now, for those of you who are returning and have been part of, attended one of these sessions, welcome back. I'm super excited that you continue to join us. It makes us super happy. But if this is your first time joining us, I do want to go ahead and spend some time introducing who we are as an organization. So the Women's Fund is a nonprofit organization that works both with women and girls in the Houston area. And everything that we do is to provide them with the tools necessary so they can be better advocates for their health. And the way we do this is by providing focused seminars, by providing curriculum-based classes like this one. And we also have amazing publications that we provide at no cost to the community. And so if you would like to look at the publications and browse through our website, you can take your phone and point the camera of your phone on that QR code. You can also use an iPad, whatever you have, and that will take you to our website. It will take you to our PDF version of our publications, and there you can browse through those publications. And if you like what you see, you can even order those and get physical copies of the publications. Now, for the remainder of the session, I am going to stop my sharing my webcam. So let me go ahead and do that right now. And that's because we are going to, I want to make sure that the session captures my voice, and that also captures a video that we're going to watch at the end. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my webcam, and let me make sure that I've admitted everyone I have. Okay, cool. So today we're going to go ahead and start by defining what empowerment is, and then we're going to look at self-worth and personal values. We will then spend time talking about self-compassion and identifying or talking about the three components of self-compassion. And as I mentioned, we are going to watch a video. This video is quite lengthy, it's about 7 minutes. And as much as I love videos, I usually refrain from watching videos this long, but I do feel like this one is very important to the notion of self-empowerment. And then we're going to go ahead and recap together what we've learned, and there'll be time for questions. Also, I do want to say that you are free to participate via the chat. I know that we're going to go ahead and remain on mute just simply because we do want to go ahead and get through the session, not as quickly as possible, but within that 45-50-minute mark. That doesn't mean that we don't want you to participate. We hope that you do participate in the chat. And when you see this green bubble or a comment bubble, that does mean that I'm going to look at the chat and see what kind of comments you're saying about the slide that we're looking at, if that makes any sense. So it might be that we're doing an activity. It might be that I'm just looking for feedback on a question that I've asked, okay? So, and my hope is that at the end of the session, you do understand how not to measure your self-worth, that you're able to identify 1 to 3 personal values, and that you can name the benefits of self-compassion. All right, so let's go ahead and start by defining what empowerment is. So empowerment is defined as a process by which people gain control over the factors and decisions that shape their life. This definition is through the World Health Organization. And yes, when you first read it, it might be very simple, but I think that it really does encompass what empowerment is and means. So let's go ahead and just start by looking at that word that's in blue, right? Empowerment is a process. And that's something that I really, really want to emphasize, because a lot of us, at some point in our life, we might have thought that empowerment is just something that you attain, right? Like it's like an end destination and cool, you got it. You unlocked the secret of empowerment, but that couldn't be furthest from the truth. Empowerment is ever evolving, which is why it's kind of difficult to talk about empowerment. But the biggest thing that I want you to understand is that empowerment is a process, and it's not an end destination, but it is what you do, right? So even though empowerment can be described as a feeling, I feel empowered, I am empowered, you feel empowered based on the things that you are doing, right? And so we're gonna go ahead and start by talking about self-worth, right? So how are you measuring your value? And this sounds silly, and I know that we all know that the way that we value ourselves can impact empowerment, but I do want to talk about your rubric system to put it in I guess, understandable terms. And so self-worth, or the way that we value ourselves, does empower us. And the way that we do it can be either healthy or unhealthy. And so a healthy way just to put it simply, might be you accepting your strengths and weaknesses and accepting yourself as you are. You value who you are. You define your value, you and yourself alone, right? Now, an unhealthy way of measuring your value, measuring your worth, might look like this, right? It's my fault, I am not worthy of love, joy, etc. Is you feeling that something that happened externally now has deemed you unworthy, right? And so although it is hard to talk about how to measure self-worth, I think the easiest way to look at it is by first looking at how not to measure self-worth, how you shouldn't be measuring your value. And so here is a list of things that you should not use to measure your value. And remember, when you see the green bubble, feel free to use the chat. And so my question to you is, have you ever used any of these criteria to define your worth? And it doesn't have to be now. You can just say, yes, I have. But have you ever used any of these sometime in your life, maybe now even, to define your worth, to define your value in the space that you take? Now I'm going to open the chat. And again, feel free to enter what you wish if you want to participate. But again, have you ever used any of these criteria to measure your worth? And I also want to know why it's important that you don't use any of these to measure your worth. And again, I'm waiting to see what you put in the chat. And I guess I'll go ahead and start with myself. So I think at one point in our lives, we do measure ourselves based on what others, on things like this. And so one way that I did measure my value, which I think all of us can attest to, is our grades, right? In high school, college, or graduate program, we might have measured our value based on grades. Also, a big one is your age, right? I think one of the best ways that my mom described it to me is looking at yourself in the mirror and then being shocked at, this is not how I looked like 10 years ago, and not even realizing that you've aged. And so how does that make you feel? Oh, oh, Rochelle. Okay, so Rochelle, so I'm gonna share what you said because I am a daughter of immigrants as well, and that resonates with me so well. And so Rochelle, I'm gonna share it, okay? So it says, the people that I grew up with and work with have led me to measure my worth through my education and job. You know, parents who are not from the US tend to tell you, be a doctor, be a lawyer, or be a disgrace. You forgot, be an engineer. That's a big one. Yeah. So Rochelle, I feel you. I think I myself wanted to be a doctor when I was in undergrad. And I definitely went through this really a long period of trying to define my worth after finding out that I didn't want to be a doctor. And how could I tell my parents I didn't want to be a doctor, right? And it's weird, but definitely. So why is it important not to define yourself based on that, quote unquote, be a doctor, be a lawyer, or be a disgrace? Oh, yeah. Rochelle, it's like, you know, although my mom doesn't push marrying, but I do understand that a lot. Aunts do. Cool, okay. And so why do you think it's not a good thing to set your value based on that? Which I know that what our parents say does matter, but why is it important not to set your value based on that? I feel like it's just you and I. Anyone else can answer too, by the way. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer it. Oh, why is it important that you don't measure your self-worth based on that? And if you don't know, you can just say pass, but I'll go ahead and answer it as you're thinking about that. And I want everyone to think about it, but just in the example that we used, because you can drive yourself crazy. And those are external factors, right? So talking about education, I think it's important that we seek knowledge, but when we just focus on being one particular thing, it is troublesome, right? Those are external factors that we can't control or that we decide not to pursue, but are based on what others are telling us to do. And so the biggest thing about things like job, age, grades, or whatever it might be, is that they aren't stable, right? So we can be a straight A student and then out of nowhere we get a D on a subject. Maybe we took astrophysics or something like that and we didn't do so good, right? So things like that are not stable, and because of that, they're not very good to measure our self-worth. If you think about, let's see, body image. So body image is a big one that I personally haven't, like, I have a friend that's experiencing this, and it's because of a medical condition that they have been diagnosed with. And so they've been diagnosed with it because they experienced weight gain, and it was weight gain, like, where's this coming from? I'm physically active. I consider myself very healthy. And so it's a transition phase of accepting the fact, oh, okay, I had this medical diagnosis, that it's going to result in weight gain, especially right now, right? And so again, you might go from being super, super healthy, having a healthy body image, and then that's taken away from you, right? So how do we measure our worth if we don't use things that we tend to use in life quite a lot, right? And so one of those ways is to identify your personal values. And so what are personal values? Well, personal values are the things that you believe to be important and are unique to you, which sounds kind of general, and it is, right? Because a lot of us do think that our job is important, right? So what are personal values if it's not jobs, right? Or a specific job title? Well, we're going to go ahead and look at a list because it's hard to define it outside of what's important to you. And hopefully you'll be able to understand what personal values is. But the reason why we're going to look at this list and try to identify these personal values is because it's a good start to understanding yourself better, especially for those of us, for instance, who are trying to, let's say, choose what we really want to study, what we really want to pursue as a career, or for those of us that are in transition phases trying to decide if we should change a career or what have you, right? And so think of personal values as living your truth and basically being your North Star. It's the things that are important to you that do guide you in the right direction to living your truth, right? So we're going to go ahead and look at a list of personal values, as I mentioned, and I encourage you to try to identify 3 to 5 personal values in this list. Now, the list is quite lengthy, so what I've done is that I have basically divided the list into segments, and so that way it's not overwhelming. And I want you to identify at least one personal value each segment, right? So we're going to go ahead and see a list. We're going to see segments, and I encourage you to identify at least one personal value in each of those segments. And then overall, I want you to identify 3 to 5 personal values. Okay. So let's go ahead and start. So the first segment of our list is this right here. So I want you to look at this list of personal values, and I want you to choose 1 or 2 again. And ask yourself things like, for instance, what are things, so who's a role model in my life and why do I admire them, right? So that's a good way to start to identifying your personal value. And so asking yourself that question, try to choose one of those, right? Some of us might value health, for instance, more than discipline. So that's kind of funny, right? So maybe you are just all about being a healthy person, being physically active. You don't necessarily care to, let's say, choose something to do 4 or 5 times a week, but you're just like, I'm just going to live a healthy lifestyle, right? Or if you're at odds and you're like 5 of these resonate with me, try to pick 2 of those 5 that really, really are more important than the other ones, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let's look at the next segment. So this one consists of words like tradition, privacy, helpfulness, respect, and I added love there, but I do think love is something that is pretty constant for all of us. But out of that list, I want you to go ahead and ask yourself, what's the most important to you, right? All right, so next on our list is this whole list of personal values. And this one has ones like uniqueness, honesty, friendship. So which one of those, out of all of those there, is the most important to you? You can even think about, so one of the things when I do this with high school students, because I think that as we age and as we grow, grow in wisdom in a sense, although we're always growing in wisdom, we do know a little bit of what's important to us. We might not have the words, and words are powerful, which is why we're doing this. But when I work with high school students, I ask them questions where I tell them like, do you remember ever doing something that went against like your parents' wishes, in the sense like, think about skipping school, right? And if you skipped school, you might have seeked adventure. But as soon as you saw your parents again, or your family unit, you were like, oh my God, you felt at odds with yourself. And that's because family might have been one of your personal values, right? You've gone against that personal value. Okay. All right, so next on our list is this right here. So wisdom, competence, spirituality, inner harmony. Which one of those resonates most with you? Now, if you do want to go ahead and share at least one or two of the things that you wrote, you can in the chat. I was interested to see what was most important to me. Now, this list was taken from like a activity, like a little test or quiz that you can do. So I can send that through your email. But I found it interesting when I found out my list. And I'm someone that tries to always look at what drives me, what's important to me. So if you want to share what's on your list, you can. Like, what's the most important thing for you? I'll give you guys a couple minutes to identify some of your personal values. Now, I do want to say that, again, when I was looking at my personal values, it was interesting. And one of the ones that caught my eye that I found was the most important to me, that I never thought it would be the most important to me, was inner harmony. I'm someone that I don't consider myself, I mean, I'm not religious, but I put inner harmony because I do find it very important to be at peace with yourself and finding ways to be at peace with yourself. And that kind of comes from that spirituality too, which was made it onto my list. Cool. Yeah, so one of the ones that I had in mind, thank you for sharing. Okay. I'm looking at everyone's. Yeah, so one of the ones that was in mine also was, oh my God, appreciation, which I thought was interesting, but I think it's a pretty big one. I'm someone that doesn't like to, if you ever done the love languages quiz, appreciation or appreciation is at the bottom of my list, but I do like to feel appreciated, and I don't like when people are not appreciated, and so I'm very like protective of people who are not appreciated. Growth, uniqueness, trust, friendship, commitment. Yeah, friendship is a big one. So I am someone that doesn't have friendship in my list because I guess it goes with appreciation, but sometimes I will do things and I'm like, okay, well, it's okay if my friend doesn't agree with it. Yeah, inner harmony, wisdom. Yeah, wisdom is definitely on my list. Okay, cool. So you get the point. All of these are examples of personal values. And the thing that they're all have in common is that they're not tied to something that can be removed from your life. Rather, these are things that just drive you, right? So if you said, for instance, financial stability, it's not necessarily trying to be a millionaire, right? It's just you, okay, well, I know that I want to be financially stable, and these are the things that I'm gonna do to drive myself to be financially stable. As opposed to being I must have a job, because those things can be taken away from you, especially during financial crisis like the one that we're experiencing right now. Okay, thank you for sharing. I'm going to minimize the chat. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a hypothetical to understand how personal values can impact a situation, how they can impact our decision making, and in turn, how they can empower us to act based on what's important to us and not based on what's important to others or what's important to society, if that makes any sense. And so I put this list together. And so this is Fatima's list: adventureness, inner harmony, and authenticity. And so hypothetically, these are her most important personal values. And so based on this list, what would she do in the following, right? So Fatima is offered a job, and it's with a good company, pays well, but it doesn't have very many vacation days, right? She's gonna be on call on weekends. She, whatever, not many vacation days. And additionally, she loves to wear her hair naturally, but her company doesn't allow for her to wear her hair naturally. So looking at Fatima's list, what would be something that she would decide based on what her values are? And again, this is interesting because we all want to have a job. We all want to get paid well. But again, considering what's going on, what do you think Fatima would do based on her personal values? And it's a hypothetical, I get it. Hold on. Yeah, right. She would leave or she wouldn't accept it. And I think that's a big one. I thought it was interesting whenever I shared this little example with someone, and they were like, what do you mean they can't wear their natural hair? That happens. That's a policy that schools and organizations have. And so if you look at her list, she definitely is all about authenticity. Adventureness are two big ones that pop out in this example for me. For her, she might want to go to a place that offers her more vacation days so she can be adventurer. She can seek her adventure, or she can adventure seek. And also she's authentic. She wants to be authentic, and if she wants to wear her hair naturally and she can't do that, she may not choose to work there, right? Hold on, let me change this. Okay, perfect, cool. So any questions so far, y'all? You can add it to the chat. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about self-compassion now. Self-compassion is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, but again, it's kind of difficult to explore because it's something that we don't practice for ourselves. And this has a lot to do with positive thinking as well. So if you haven't watched a positive thinking session, I encourage you to do that. And then this would make, these two things will make sense, right? And so what is self-compassion? Well, self-compassion is the ability to love yourself mindfully, even in times of hardship, right? So we talked about self-worth, we talked about personal values, and the importance of identifying personal values. So that way you measure your value based on things that can't be removed from you, if that makes any sense. But what happens when you experience hardship? What happens when you are feeling you're not feeling things that are so positive? Right, so those are the questions that I'm hoping you're asking yourself. How do you treat yourself? And that's what self-compassion is all about, right? And so self-compassion incorporates three components. And so the first component, which all the components are going to be in orange, and then in the blue is the opposite. So the first component is mindfulness, right? And the opposite of that is over-identification. Then you have self-kindness, which is the opposite of that is self-judgment. And then you have common humanity, and the opposite of that is isolation, okay? So let's go ahead and look at these three components in detail together. And so mindfulness is the ability to be aware of your negative emotions and accept them as they are and express them in a healthy way, right? And so some of these emotions that are negative and not necessarily unhealthy, these are real emotions that we're all going to feel at one point in our lives, can be sadness, shame, fear, and defeat, right? Those are some negative emotions that we all feel at one point in our life. And so I want you to think about moments that you felt these emotions and think about what did you do, right? Did you ignore them or did you welcome them, right? And so mindfulness, if you're being mindful, you would have accepted those negative emotions, right? And you would have worked through them and you would have expressed them in a healthy way, either to yourself or to others, right? So if you're stressed out, for example, when you were stressed out, were you able to cope with that stress? And were you able to express it in a healthy way, right? Were you able to communicate, hey, I'm stressed out right now? Shame is a big one. Shame is a very difficult to analyze. It's a very difficult feeling. And so again, did you welcome that feeling or did you ignore it, right? So that's the first part of self-compassion, being able to accept these negative emotions that aren't necessarily unhealthy, rather, they're just a human feeling. Now, the second part is self-kindness. And so once you've identified or once you've accepted your emotion of whether it might be sadness, shame, stress, are you able to show yourself care and concern, right? And self-kindness does involve being able to use a kind and understanding tone. In other words, to talk to yourself in a healthy, caring, concerned way, right? And so this has to do with your inner critic, something that we cover in positive thinking. And so a healthy way of talking to yourself that shows concern and care is being able to go, hey, you made a mistake, you messed up, but you're only human, right? It's okay to feel sad. You might have acted a certain way, but you were stressed out. Okay, it's okay. Maybe you were angry with someone and you are beating yourself up, and you feel shame, and you can just remind yourself, it's okay, I am a good person, right? So that's what self-kindness is, and it is part of self-compassion. The next one, or the last and third component, is common humanity. And this one is, I think it's in the name, right? It's a sense of belonging. But I do want to make a point that it doesn't mean that you, it's not thinking that you share the same experiences, in the sense that we both, or two people, can experience something similar, but we might feel or grieve in a different way. And I said grieving because I'm thinking like the loss of a father. I haven't lost my father, but I'm sure that two people are going to grieve very differently, and that's okay. And it's so common humanity is not going, hey, we feel the same way, but it's telling yourself we all have painful experiences. And so I am feeling defeated today. Others have felt defeated too, due to their own circumstances, due to their own experiences. I am not alone, right? That's self-compassion. And the reason why this is one of the most important ones, I think they're all important, but common humanity is important because when we face something painful, we can feel alone and lonely. We can almost drown in our pain. And again, if you think about times where you just felt defeated, it's okay to feel that way. But it's important that you remind yourself that you're not alone. Others have felt defeated too. And how can you work towards resolving these feelings, these negative feelings, right? And so in summary, self-compassion looks like this, right? It's accepting your negative emotions. It's adopting a kind and understanding tone, which has to do with your inner critic. It's knowing that pain is a human experience, right? And that's in short and in summary. And it makes sense, but I want you to think about how many times do we do this to ourselves? Not very many times, unless you really have gone like, okay, I'm gonna work on my inner critic. I'm gonna make sure that I am my own cheerleader, whatever it might be. But for the most part, we are quick to treat friends with compassion, but not ourselves. And that's why self-compassion is so important. It's important that you catch yourself being, I guess, like you judging yourself harshly, and making sure that you go, okay, you're feeling this way, that's okay. And it's okay to feel this way. Now, why is self-compassion so important to health? the list is plenty, right? But think about even relationships, right? Healthy relationships are important, and relationships are not just, you know, a partner, a romantic partner, but it's relationships overall. I was talking about inner critic, and one thing about how you talk to yourself is that sometimes you can assume things about others, and you start thinking things and you go, oh my God, they're thinking all these things about me. And it's important that when you're thinking that way, you go, okay, it's okay to feel this way, but this is probably not true, right? Showing yourself compassion and working through those emotions or those things that you tell yourself. It also helps with mental well-being. Being able to judge yourself less harshly is definitely going to empower you, and it's going to ensure that your rubric isn't unreasonable, right? And that in turn will help you with your mental health. And autonomy is a big one, right? We just spent time talking about personal values, and your personal values should help you, I guess, make decisions that are difficult in the sense that they guide you. And it should help you feel in control, which is something that's super important about empowerment, is being able to control the factors that you can. I do also want to say that self-compassion, however, isn't just loving yourself tenderly, if that makes any sense. And that's one common misconception about self-compassion, is that it's just, I guess, you know, that being tender, being nice, or whatever it might be. But part of self-compassion is also acting. And so think about if you think about a compassionate mother, right, or a compassionate grandma, whatever it might be, that mother figure, father figure, to be compassionate as a parent means to, okay, you know, you're not feeling your best, but it's also being like, hey, we have to make sure that we get this homework done, right? So it's acting. You don't want to, self-compassion is not allowing yourself to self-indulge, which is one of the biggest things that people think it is. Rather, it's being able to go, hey, let's do what we need to. If you're feeling bad, okay, but these are the things that we need to do to ensure that we reduce harm in the long term as well. Okay, so it also is acting, and I hope that makes sense, because a lot of times the thing about self-compassion, or why people what's it called, might have a hard time accepting self-compassion in their life, is because of that, because they think that it just means not acting and just telling yourself all these tender things and not being able to act based on that. No, what it means is not judging yourself so harshly that you get stuck in the negative, and being able to move forward so you act. So it does build resilience, and it definitely does empower you. So this is a diagram that I got from Kristin Neff, who is the leading psychologist and researcher on the science of self-compassion. And she describes self-compassion as yin and yang, right? Two forces different from one another, but that balance one another. It's both comforting, soothing, and validating yourself, but it's also protecting, providing, and motivating. And so think about things like setting boundaries for healthy relationships. Boundaries is the act of doing, and some people might have trouble setting these boundaries, but setting boundaries is part of compassion and showing yourself care, because you're reducing harm, right? You don't want to say yes to everyone. Setting those boundaries protects you, right? It can also be motivating, right? If you tell yourself, hey, things are gonna be okay, it's okay if you feel this way, hopefully you get unstuck, right? Hopefully you start feeling better, and then you're able to move on and make a game plan, okay? So I'm going to share, so here's a QR code, so you can point your camera, and so you can read more about self-compassion as far as the science goes. And also this one, if I remember correctly, talks about common obstacles that people either hear or experience when they hear about self-compassion. And I also shared a quote by Dr. Kristin Neff that says, unlike self-criticism, which asks if you're good enough, self-compassion asks what's good for you, right? So what is good for you? And that's pretty much what self-compassion is. Let me see. Okay, so we have some time, and so we're going to talk about pop culture real quick. I did want to talk about Queer Eye. I don't know if you've ever watched Queer Eye. If you have, let me know. I'm looking at the chat. But Queer Eye is a show on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, I think you should, at least the last season. And the reason why I think Queer Eye is so popular is because we watch even though it's a 1 hour show, we basically experience the empowerment that someone goes through with the help of the Fab Five, which is these the people here in front of you, right? And so one of the, if you watch the new season, one of the, it's not my favorite episode, but I think it's one of those episodes that shows you the manifestation of empowerment is with Dr. Yi. And so Dr. Yi is a pediatric doctor, if I remember correctly. And her experience is interesting because she, you know, you hear she's a pediatric doctor. So of course she is, she's gone to school, she's educated, and you're here thinking, oh man, she's amazing, right? You did some hard stuff. What you've accomplished is amazing. But you find out that she's at odds with herself in many, many ways, right? She feels inadequate because she can't spend too much time with family, and family's part of her personal values. She also has a distorted image of her body, right? She thinks that her thighs are so big. And quite frankly, my thighs are bigger than hers, and I love my thighs. And so I encourage you to watch this season 4. I forgot the episode number, but it does show you everything that we talked about. And it does, and this is why pretty much Queer Eye is quite popular, because it is the sense where you see empowerment being kind of, it's a light bulb moment on the people who are the heroes, quote unquote. And so Dr. Yi's experience is interesting because the whole time, you as an audience, you're like, you're freaking amazing, but you see how someone who doesn't check themselves on their personal values and doesn't check themselves as far as like their compassion and how they practice self-compassion can impact their idea and even in relationships. Okay, and so now it's time to watch that video together, and I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, so y'all are still here. So we're gonna watch a video. And the reason we're going to watch this video is because I want you to look at a scenario, a real life scenario, not just Queer Eye. And I want us to have a conversation on like the things and topics that we've covered. And I want you to ask yourself these questions as you're watching the video. Again, the video is about 7 minutes long. We have time. And so I want you to watch it. I might stop it a little bit sooner, who knows. But again, ask yourself these questions, and then after the video, we'll go ahead and have a conversation on what we saw, okay? And we'll answer these questions together. Okay. Okay, there you go. So I'm gonna give it a couple of minutes to load, and if you don't hear the sound, let me know, please.
I'm Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and this is a word about why my Black hair story is both personal and political. Before I was an elected official, I did everything.
Oh, sorry, I was checking the chat. Okay, sounds perfect, thank you.
I wore wigs, I wore extensions, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to get Senegalese twist all the way down to my waist. And what happened is that I got these Senegalese twists, and I feel like I met myself fully for the first time. You know, I sort of looked in the mirror and I said, oh, there I am. And it felt good. So what started out as a transitional hairstyle ultimately became a statement and something that I was very intentional about. And I was very aware this hairstyle would be filtered and interpreted by some as a political statement that was militant, or people will think you're angry. And I said, well, they already think that. What I was not prepared for was the glorious gift and blessing of the acceptance and the community and the affirmation. Now I walk into rooms and little girls are wearing t-shirts that say my Congresswoman wears braids, and we receive letters from all over the globe of women who talk about their own emancipation, that they feel that I've given them permission. My twists have become such a synonymous and conflated part of not only my personal identity and how I show up in the world, but my political brand. That's why I think it's important that I'm transparent about this new normal and living with alopecia. In the fall, when I was getting my hair retwisted, is the first time that I was made aware that I had some patches. From there, it accelerated very quickly. I had been waking up every morning to sinkfuls of hair. Every night I was employing all the tools that I had been schooled and trained in throughout my life as a Black woman, because I thought that I could stop this. I wrapped my hair. I wore a bonnet. I slept on a silk pillowcase. And yet and still every morning, which I faced with dread, I did not want to go to sleep because I did not want the morning to come where I would remove this bonnet and my wrap and be met with more hair in the sink and an image in the mirror of a person who increasingly felt like a stranger to me. And so impeachment eve, the last little bit of my hair came out. I was completely bald, and in a matter of hours was going to have to walk into the floor, the House chamber, the House of Representatives, and cast a vote in support of articles of impeachment. And so I didn't have the luxury of mourning what felt like the loss of a limb. It was a moment of transformation, not of my choosing. It is with a heavy heart, but a resolved one. And because I believe our democracy is worth fighting for, I will vote to impeach Donald J. Trump, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. But I knew the moment demanded that I stand in it and that I lean in. And I exited the floor as soon as I could. And I hid in a bathroom stall. I felt naked, exposed, vulnerable. I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I felt betrayed. And then I also felt that I was participating in a cultural betrayal because of all the little girls who write me letters, who come up to me, who take selfies with me, #TwistNation. And I thought of those t-shirts and I just kept revisiting that. And I immediately knew that I was going to want to, when I felt ready, go public, because I felt like I owed all those little girls an explanation. My husband says I don't, that everything doesn't have to be political. The reality is that I'm Black, and I'm a Black woman, and I'm a Black woman in politics, and everything I do is political. I think you might overly intellectualize it and say, it's just hair. People are well-meaning and have been reminding me of the India Arie song, I'm not my hair, you are not your hair. And that's true, but I still want it. So I'm trying to find my way here. And I do believe going public will help. This is my official public revealing. I'm ready now because I want to be freed from the secret and the shame that secret carries with it. And because I'm not here just to occupy space, I'm here to create it. And I want to be free. I am making peace with having alopecia. I have not arrived there. I am very early in my alopecia journey. But I'm making progress every day. And that's why I'm doing this today. It's about self-agency. It's about power. It's about acceptance. Right now on this journey, when I feel the most unlike myself, is when I am wearing a wig. So I think that means I'm on my way. I've been experimenting, and so
Okay, so I hope you can hear me. I always try not to cry during that video. I did this time. So we are going to go ahead and look at these questions. And I just want to go ahead and ask you, I know we're reaching the end of our session. I want to go ahead and ask you, you can either answer these questions or comment on how it pertains to empowerment. I know she said, I'm doing this because it is about power, but how did you see her, or how did she explain her journey? I think it covers pretty much everything that we've talked about today. And if you don't know who Ayanna Pressley is, she is a congresswoman, and so she does have a position, a public position. And so I guess just trying to hear from you, what happened to her and what were her emotions during this process? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start a little bit. So, or at least share what I wanted to gain, what I wanted you to gain from this video. It's not to show you who Ayanna is, but I do think that this is a very transparent moment of someone that we've seen on television or we might have heard of. And so I'm a firm believer that no one has to share their hardships with us, that they are for sure entitled to grieve with their loved ones or to feel, those negative emotions with who they did choose to. And so the fact that she went public means that she is someone that definitely values transparency, and also in a way she values commitment to her community. And she continuously goes, I identify with my Senegalese twist. And although I don't have Senegalese twist, hair is such a huge identifying factor, which is why if someone who experiences chemotherapy and they have hair loss, it is a moment of, shame, grief, or whatever it might be for the hair loss. And it sounds silly, but putting it into that perspective on, hey, hair does definitely identify us, or we identify with our hair, makes sense, right? Especially for someone who just starts losing hair in patches, and it's almost very, very, I would say quick, but also slow in progress. And so the reason I shared this video for you, because it shows you almost her journey of, oh my God, this is happening. This is horrible. Why is this happening? I am feeling this way. I'm feeling shame. She says, I am feeling, embarrassed, shame, betrayal. I'm betraying my community. And then she kind of starts going, okay, but this is why I'm going public, or I've accepted it. I'm in my journey of coming into terms or in peace to what I'm going through. So anyways, I hope this kind of showcases everything that we've talked about and how it is empowering to talk about self-worth, personal values, and whatever it might be. Thanks for sharing, Rochelle. Yeah, for sure. And so definitely her freedom as well. Yep, Molly, she values honesty for sure, representation and acceptance. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a struggle. Like, I know she went public because she is a public figure. And so the worst that could happen to is like not going public. But I also think, like you said, she does definitely values honesty in the sense like, I'm going to share this because I have to, right? If I don't, I'm going to feel at odds with myself. Yeah. So to recap real quick, let me go back. When setting goals or making decisions, it's important that you refer to your list of personal values. And so things to ask yourself is, what is it that I want to achieve? And is this in line with what's important to me? And so also remember that success is often measured by others, but measuring your success or your worth in that way isn't always healthy. So ask yourself, how do I measure my worth, and what is important to me? And How do I perceive the importance of this space that I occupy? And lastly, remember that when you try something new or when you try something, there is such thing as dumb luck. So you might fail if you don't have quote unquote dumb luck. And so whenever you experience failure or you experience negative emotions, how do you treat yourself, right? Ask yourself those questions. And do you treat yourself as you would treat someone like a friend, your sister, your sibling, or even your mother, right? And if you don't evaluate what you can do or how you can start practicing self-compassion in your life. And another person that's very big in the science of self-compassion is Carl Rogers. And so he shares the curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change, right? Cool. And so we have come to an end to our session. If you have any questions for me, I'll go ahead and answer them. Also, I do encourage you to take our survey. And so let me go ahead and get that for you. You can fill out the survey using the QR code or access the survey. And if you have any questions after the session or comments, you can also email us at healtheducator.com. Something else